Peace, family. You're listening to the Classroom in the Cell podcast. This is Marc Lamont Hill, and I'm joined by
Mumia Abu Jamal in part two.
That's it. Part two, man. We were sitting here last episode talking about cultural nationalism and political nationalism and how it sort of played out in our real lives and real histories as black folk in America. And one of the things I was saying as we were ending last episode was that there's a part of me that feels like our oppressors, that the structures of oppression, the people, the stewards of our oppression, and even the state itself in this kind of big picture, abstract way and concrete way, would be happy if they had a crystal ball in 1960 and could see that in 2024, yeah, we celebrate Kwanzaa to some extent. Yeah, black folk then started giving each other black people names, that we have started to, have some schools and, there's the Black Art Festival and there's Black bookstores. There's all this cool black stuff, but there's no nation state. There's no new country. There's no radical new political arrangement. There's no radical new economic arrangement. I feel like they might look at this and say, oh, we're going to be fine. Let them talk Kwanzaa and change their name.
Absolutely. But here's the kicker. History is not a straight line. It moves sometimes in circles and sometimes it goes into a cul-de-sac and sits and waits. And the struggle for black freedom, no one can say that struggle is over, especially after the George Floyd situation. No one can say that black people in America are free. And even when right-wing racists talk about freedom, they talk about, people who are super rich, like Oprah and stuff like that. Well, the exception in this case proves the rule. And to be black in America is to always live behind the veil, as Du Bois talked about, and the double consciousness, as Du Bois talked about. And that veil is oppression. And, also, what we can do is study that period and see what went wrong so that we can learn how to do it better. And the new generations can not fall into the pitfalls that...
This is a call from Pennsylvania State Correctional Institution, Mahanoy. This call is subject to recording and monitoring.
And many of those pitfalls are always our people fighting each other instead of fighting the system. And it's easier to fight each other. It's not as dangerous to fight each other. That's insane. Because, the people don't fight the system because they fear the system. You dig? Because the system is fearsome. And, but never underestimate the power of culture in this respect. Howard Zinn said, culture sometimes is the precursor of resistance and movements. And Howard was right.
So why hasn't it been that for us in the United States? Like, I get it. I think you're right that there are people who got consciousness by their name change or by a festival or by a book or by something that then made them pivot into a more radical politics. But there's a way that I think if the cultural space that we're operating from is purely symbolic or conceptualizes resistance as symbolic rather than material, then we may usher people into a raised consciousness to the extent that they don't worship white supremacy in the same way, or they affirm the beauty of their bodies and their faces and their minds in a different way. They develop, indigenous or traditional faiths in a different way. They do all that stuff, but they have no critique of capital. They have no critique of power relations, beyond I don't want to say superficial, but beyond the level of the symbolic. Like
this is
to
a call
me,
from Pennsylvania State Correctional Institution, Mahanoy. This call is subject to recording and monitoring.
But you know why that is so, Mark?
Why?
Because those forces who did oppose capitalism overtly were anti-capitalist in their orientation and their work every day, were crushed and destroyed. and driven underground. You dig? There are people who have never really heard of the Black Panther Party, much less the Black Liberation Army, or Assata Shakur, or Zayd Malik Shakur. And when people think about what Malcolm and Martin were converging on. Malcolm was beginning to embrace a socialist point of view. And when you look at Martin's last great speech, I speak about his Riverside speech, a year the day of his assassination, which I don't think is a coincidence. He denounced racism, war, militarism, and capitalism. And all of his friends and supporters, every major newspaper in America, said he was washed up, that he should never be listened to again. And I'm including, civil rights organizations. And
for sure.
They denounced him. It was his lowest point in his public life. But he did that because someone gave him a copy of a magazine called Ramparts. And he opened up that magazine and he saw Vietnamese babies burning because napalm was used against Vietnamese peasants. And it sickened him. It sickened him to see babies treated like that. And, this Southern man who loved, not just the allure of women, but the allure of food. This chubby Southern man, for days, could not eat because every time he looked at chicken or a plate, he thought of those children that he saw, and he would push the plate away. I'm not hungry today. And the only way he could address that pain that he felt looking at babies being burned was to speak out at Riverside against the Vietnam War. And for that, I believe that's the reason. I don't think it's coincidence that a year to the day after that speech, he was assassinated.
For sure.
I think it was a crime against capitalism. And what that does is it instills fear in the oppressed.
Right.
People
does that fear make you say, you know what, I'm going to just throw on this afro, I'm going to grow up this fro, I'm going to rock this dashiki, and still feel like I'm doing some shit. I still feel like I'm resisting, even though this resistance doesn't challenge the authority of the state. I mean, I think about Angela Davis, too, as we're thinking about Malcolm and Martin. I think about Angela. So many people, when I talk to middle class, I'm always impressed at how many people know Angela. If I'm with Angela Davis, she's like the Beyonce of activists. And what I mean by that is celebrities act like fans around Beyonce, right? Like that's the one. They never too cool for Beyonce. You know what I mean? And I feel like, and Mike Jackson was the same way. And now with Angela, it's like even the most diehard, I'm not impressed by nobody. I'm not blah blah blah. When they see Angela Davis, I see the hardest people melt and wait in line. And Angela's not even grandiose. She doesn't even want all that attention, right? But there's a way that when I hear those same people talk about what Angela meant to them, especially the middle class folk, the everyday folk, the everyday working class folk, the middle class folk, the people who watched her on the news as the news people demonized her, but we were secretly cheering for her, right? When so often the thing that they hold from her is the afro.
Yeah, symbol.
You know what I'm saying? Like not the radical politics. They don't even know that she was a philosopher. They're not necessarily thinking about her being a student of Marcuse. They don't know Marcuse from Marcus Houston, right? But what they know is they know that Angela meant something to them. And unfortunately, it feels like the resistance that Angela represented was not what happened in a Marin County courtroom or what happened at University of Frankfurt or University of Berlin in a classroom, in an intellectual space. What they remember is the fro. What they remember is the symbolism.
But brother, they tried to give her 3 death penalties, not 1,
right?
Not 2, 3. And if she was not defended by an extraordinary black attorney, she'd have been on death row in California and likely executed. Don't get it twisted. And, people forget that because
that's
it's
my point.
to forget that. Yeah.
That's my point. The stakes were high, and they weren't giving her 3 death penalties because of her fro. They were giving her 3 death penalties because she was a brilliant, radical, second wave feminist, communist, anti-capitalist, pro-Palestinian, revolutionary philosopher, right?
And organizer.
And
scholar philosopher, yeah.
Right.
She wasn't just spouting philosophical ideas, which she does every day, but she was also part of movements on the ground trying to get freedom. The Che Lumumba Club. She was a member of a branch of the Black Panther Party, and they came for her. With both barrels, bro. People don't remember that because some are too young and some it scares them. They don't want to know. That's why I think it's important to read books about COINTELPRO so that you can wake up and smell the coffee and see what time it is. I don't want to be, boasting about a book, but We Want Freedom by your man's.
Yes.
A chapter in there on on COINTELPRO about how they were political police. And again, Dick Gregory, man, like a comedian, how do you send the address of a comedian to the mafia if the FBI? In what world?
Right.
Well, in a world where Dick Gregory supported Martin Luther King with money, and he went down there and protested, got beat up a few times, locked up. They were like, we got something for this Negro.
But see, again, Dick Gregory makes sense to me because comedy critique in the world is one thing, but when you start providing material resources to a counter movement, now it's like, oh shit, all right, he's doing something here, and we need to fight it. And I get that we're in different places on this, or maybe you have more perspective and you're more generous than I am. I'm just starting to worry that that when we remember those moments, whether it's the Panthers, it's like, do we really understand Huey's political analysis? Assata, do we it's like I feel like we just keep reducing people to the superficial, and we lose sight of their genius, their brilliance, and why they were a threat to the state. Dr. King wasn't a threat to the state because he told Negroes not to hit back. He was a threat to the state for standing up, as you said, on April 4th of '67, and giving that speech in Riverside about why he opposes the war in Vietnam, or him generally critiquing, militarism and state violence, his shifting position on Palestine. All these things are, to me, part of why he
you have 1 minute left.
Interesting and radical political figure. And I'm not dissing I love the cultural nationalism stuff. I walk toward it. But even like neo soul music, it's like, oh, that was selling market neo soul. But when NWA is saying F the police or Public Enemy is offering a radical critique, the industry's like, oh, we gotta get away from that. That ain't what we want.
Right. But that's the point about terrorizing the people who gave the most stiff resistance. And because it ain't for that person. It's like Navalny in Russia. It's to scare people from those movements. Right? And to destroy resistance. And this is an empire like any other empire. And the state is an immoral figure, not a moral one. And it uses power to intimidate and to destroy movements of resistance. Let's not get that thing twisted. That's why would they kill a man in the bed like Fred Hampton?
Right.
Drug him.
Thank you for using Securus.
Love you, brother.
Goodbye.
Love you too, man. Family, this is why we keep going, man. I love when Mumia and I can finish a conversation, but also when we can have a slight disagreement. I don't even know if we disagree. I need to figure this out. I think, again, Mumia is being very generous and thoughtful about how culture leads the way, or can lead the way toward other forms of resistance, other forms of concrete political action and resistance and stuff. I don't think he's wrong. In fact, I'm sure he's right. I don't know. As I get older, I become a little more cynical about these things. Maybe that's all it is, or pessimistic. Not pessimistic, just cynical a little bit. I don't know. We'll keep thinking about it. Anyway, family, keep listening to The Classroom and The Cell. It's our podcast. You're going to hear from us a couple times a week as the prison system is unpredictable in certain ways. They're intentionally difficult with us. We can't always predict when the episodes will come out, but every single time we have an opportunity to rap, Mumia and I do, and we do it for y'all, man. So continue to listen. Go to the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel and listen to all the episodes of the Classroom and the Cell podcast. We really appreciate y'all listening. You can go to YouTube channel, go to Marc Lamont Hill official, not just check out the episodes, but check out the content we have on there on a range of conversations. Hit the like button. Let the YouTube universe know that you rock with us. Hit the subscribe button so we can, build a base of support. And, of course, if you're so inclined, hit the join button. Become a monthly subscriber to the channel. It allows us to invest in this independent, grassroots, radical media project. If you want to circumvent the machine, the corporate machine, and send the funds directly to us, you can go to Cash App. Cash App, $MLHTV, $MLHTV. And when you do that, you support us directly. If you want the funds to go strictly to Mumia, if you want to make a donation to Mumia, Mumia's legal defense, Mumia's living expenses, Mumia's whatever, just put that in the subject line, and I'll make sure that happens as well. All right, family, until next time, on the move.